Isn't it kind of silly when you think about it, the things that we used to believe when we were kids? We used to believe, I believed this statement was true. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I used to say it, I used to believe it, and then you kind of realize, wait a second, that's not true. Words really, really do kind of hurt me. I no longer believe that, right? Words have more power than we tend to give them credit for. I read a true story of a single mom who was raising 3 kids. She, because of her own brokenness, said things like this to her kids. Her only daughter, she said, "Nobody's going to want to date a fat mess like you," and then she would laugh. So that girl let go of herself because obviously her mom knew what she was talking about. The youngest son, she said, "You might as well drop out of geometry now because geometry is for smart kids, not kids like you." So after his junior year, not only did he drop out of geometry, he dropped out of high school. The middle boy, he became an extreme workaholic. Very successful in life, but at a terrible cost. Because he was out to prove that his mom's words about him were untrue. Yeah, that statement is really wrong, isn't it? Sticks and stones may, oh man, words hurt like crazy. And I don't know if you agree with this, but I think that the world we're living in is getting harsher with words. I feel like we are in a time now where people are more critical than ever before. And a big part of it is the internet, right? It used to be that these people we call trolls. You ever heard of this phrase, trolls? They are on all kinds of social media places, and all they do is criticize and tear people down. It used to be the trolls. They were in existence in our world, but you had to actually get to know them and to go to be where they were for them to troll you, right? You had to actually go to work with them or school with them, and only then, when you were close to them, could they say these awful things to you. But if you were away from them, well, they couldn't impact anyone. And now, because of social media and the internet, they can get to anybody. And so they just put their poison out constantly, and the world is becoming more critical and more discouraged as we endure so much of this. I read this statistic this last week. It won't surprise any of you. On average in our work environment, we receive a few minutes per year of encouragement. But one of the researchers said thousands of hours per year of criticism and critique, right? Some of you know exactly what that feels like. It's the environment that you go to work in every day. You can do good every single day and no one will say a thing, but boy, watch what happens if you make a single mistake. And all of a sudden they're all over you. And it's so discouraging to be treated this way. This is why, one author said, when this happens, you can only take so many hits before all of a sudden you start to become angry, depressed, and anxious. Hey, are those the same words they're saying about American society right now? That we are angry, that we are depressed, and that we are anxious? Isn't that what they're saying? That's how people feel today. Well, you live in a critical environment, that's what's going to happen. It's just the outcome of so much, in part of so much of these words. Now, the truth is this, okay, I can't do anything. I can't do anything about the critics in our world. I'd like to, but I can't. I have no power over them. But here's what I want you to understand. Despite the presence of critics in your life, despite that, you and I, we have tremendous power. You probably don't feel very powerful as you're sitting here today. You probably didn't walk in here with your shoulders back and be like, yeah, I'm a powerful person just walked in the room. You probably didn't feel that way. But the truth is, I hope by the end of this message today, you realize just how powerful you actually are. So we're in this series called Sticks and Stones, we're talking about the power of words, and I want to show you this power, and I want to show you what the Bible has to say about how to use the power of encouragement. If you haven't done it, would you take your notes out, grab a pen? If you're watching online, we're so grateful you're there. If you want to open up your notes, you can grab, if you're watching on our website at PennyelChurchLife.com, the notes are right there. We really want to encourage you to open them up and follow along. So let me jump right into this. We're only going to talk about a couple of things today. First, again, you have to understand just how powerful you actually are. It's the thing I want, if you take nothing else away from this today, this is what I want you to get. I want you to understand just how powerful you are. And the power is in the words that you use when you use encouragement. So years ago, there was, on the Today Show, there was a man that was brought on to be interviewed. His name was Brian Bennett. He had grown up in an abusive home. So if you grow up in an abusive home, childhood trauma is really rough on people, right? Can really set them on bad paths. He struggled in school. He'd been picked on regularly at a young age, but by the time he was on the Today Show, he was being interviewed because he was successful, he was well-adjusted, and the interviewer said, "What made the difference? What made the difference?" Because kids raised in this kind of abusive environment don't often turn out like this. He said, the defining moment in his life came when a teacher simply told him that she cared about him and she believed in him. So few words. So few words. But a teacher took the time to say, I care about you and I believe in you. And they changed the course of this young man's life. Do you understand how powerful you are? With just a few words, you literally have the power to change people's lives. Now, when you understand how powerful this is, do you know why? Does it make more sense why the Bible is filled with commands like this? The Bible is filled with commands to encourage one another. This may be, I say it regularly when I come across things like this, this may be one of the most disobeyed commands of the Bible, right? I mean, just think about it in church relationships alone. That's what this verse was written for. In the church, you're supposed to encourage each other. When was the last time you encouraged anyone in the church where you attend? But I can go beyond that. I mean, because the Bible doesn't limit it just to your church relationships. For those of you who are married, when was the last time you said something encouraging to your spouse? If you're a parent, when was the last time you said something encouraging to your kids? When was the last time you said something encouraging to your boss? Or the people you work with? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I already know. Because some of you are like, Brian, you don't know my boss. You don't know the people I work with. There's not much there to encourage, right? That's what you're thinking. I know it, right? So here's the problem with that. You need to understand whales. You need to understand whales. This will change your whole perspective on that, all right? So have you ever been to SeaWorld? You ever been to the place where where the whales do these incredible tricks? I've never been there, but I've seen obviously video and I've seen teaching. Years ago, I know how they do this. I read a book called Whale Done by Ken Blanchard. It's on the back of your notes at the very bottom. It is a short little book. It is a story, and it is fantastic. By the way, he also wrote a book for parents called Whale Done for Parents. So if you are a parent and you still want to influence your kids in a positive way, get that book. It's short, it's simple, it's easy to read. And so what he said is, well, how do you train these massive animals to do this? Do you know how they train them? First off, you got to build trust, and you build trust obviously by being positive and positive interactions. And so what they do, for instance, they put a rope across that giant pool where they're in, and anytime the whale accidentally swims over the rope, you know what they do? They give them a fish. Now, they like fish. It's like giving me chocolate. It's like, what? Oh, man. Right? So it's like, oh, my goodness. And so then they go out swimming again. All of a sudden, they swim over the rope again. Guess what they do? They give them another fish. And all of a sudden, the whale is like, every time I go over this rope, I get a fish. Wow. So guess what they do? They go over the rope. And then they train them so that now when I blow the whistle and you go over the rope, then you get the fish. And then they start raising the rope out of the water. And pretty soon, they have them doing stuff like this. Why? Because they want the fish. They want the reward. They want the reward. And there is only positive feedback for these giant animals. No negative, no criticism. How are you going to criticize them, right? You get rewarded when you do it right, and that's what drives all the behavioral change in animals. So you're like, well, that's an interesting thing about animals, but that doesn't really relate to people. Okay. So Amy Sutherland wrote an article once for the New York Times. And the article said this: what Shamu the whale taught me about a happy marriage. She said, for 12 years of marriage, she said, I've been kind of frustrated with my husband. He still has all these kind of little irritating habits. I know that none of you know what that's like, right? So to be frustrated with someone with irritating habits, right? And so she said, it wasn't enough to divorce him, but it kind of dulled the love that I had for him. So she said, I set out one day to move my husband a little bit closer to perfection. Isn't that a nice way to word that? Just going to nudge him a little closer towards perfection, so that he would annoy me a little less. So I set about to improve him by nagging. Well, that's how she was going to do it. I'm going to improve him by nagging. She said, here's what happened. The more I nagged him, instead of driving slower, he drove faster. Instead of shaving more often, he shaved less often. And he was a bike rider, so he'd go down these long bike riders. He'd come home. You ever seen what they wear? You know, the bike riders when they're... So he'd peel that stuff off, and he'd drop his sweaty stuff on the floor. There's a clothes hamper right there. Oh, no, right on the floor. And so she said, the more I nagged him about his sweaty workout clothes on the ground, the longer he left them there. It was the opposite of everything she wanted. And so then she started doing research on a book. She was going to write a book, and so she went to California to see how they train exotic animals like the whales. And she said, the central lesson I learned from exotic animal trainers is that I should reward behavior that I like and basically ignore the behavior I don't. After all, you don't get a sea lion to balance a ball on the end of its nose by nagging. Right? Doesn't happen. So the same goes for the American husband. She said, when I got back home, I began thanking Scott if he threw even one dirty shirt into the hamper, even one. She said, if he threw two in, I'd kiss him. Meanwhile, I would step over all the other clothes that he didn't get in the hamper. She said, sometimes I'd kick him under the bed. But as he basked in my appreciation, the piles grew smaller. So here's what you need to understand and why this works, why God commands it so much in the Bible. So the first thing is you got to praise progress. That's what you're doing. So 17 garments on the ground, but one day one goes maybe accidentally fell into the hamper. Am I right? Doesn't matter. Praise progress. 1 out of 17 is now where it belongs. And so jump all over that. Most people don't, do they? They focus on the 16 still to go. Right? There's no praise for any progress at all. And the reason why you praise progress is because what gets praised gets repeated. You got to lock that in your head. What gets praised gets repeated. It doesn't just work with animals. It works with husbands. It works with wives. It works with kids. It works with employees. What gets praised gets repeated. What gets praised gets repeated. It's not, now don't get this wrong. It's not what gets nagged gets repeated. That's what we tend to think. I will criticize them into compliance. What gets nagged, that doesn't work. Many people can give a testimony. Oh yeah, I can tell you. Nagged and criticize, and it never brings any positive thing. It's clear that what gets praised gets repeated, because here's what you need to understand. Encouragement drives growth, not criticism. I don't have that on your notes. You may want to write it on the side. Encouragement drives growth, not criticism. Do you know that? Encouragement drives growth, not criticism. It doesn't even make sense if you say it logically. I'm going to be really, really negative so that they become positive. What? No, if I want them to be more positive, what do I have to be? More positive. What gets praised gets encouraged. Or what encouragement drives growth, not criticism. Take a look at how clear the Bible is about this. Look at this prompt, look at this command. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. Did you catch what he said? Look at that verse again. everything. What percentage of the words coming out of your mouth match that verse right there? What percentage? When you think about your interactions with the people you love, with the people you work with, what percentage of the words coming out of your mouth match that? Good and helpful words that are out to encourage people. And what does the Bible say? What's the standard? The goal? 100%. Oh man, I'm not there. Not there. So why would God put a big bar like this for us to jump over? Well, look at what it says in the Bible. Pleasant words promote instruction. You want to change people? Use positive words. So here's my question. 2 questions. Do you understand how powerful encouragement is? Do you understand it? And second, are you using it? How much encouragement did you give to your spouse or your friends or your coworkers or your kids or your parents this last week? How much? How many encouraging things did you say last week alone? You have to understand that you have power, and then once you understand that power, then you can actually do the second thing, which is so important. Now you have to establish it as a habit. Once you understand how much power you actually have in just a few spoken words, you can change people's lives. Once you understand the power of this, now you have to start making it a habit in your life. So let's jump right into this. Well, how do you make it a habit? Well, the first thing is you have to make it systematic. You have to make it systematic. How many of you think that you are going to accidentally wake up tomorrow and be a more encouraging person? Right? Anyone think that they're just going to accidentally be more encouraging? It's like, I accidentally got in shape this year. I accidentally saved a lot of money and lived below my means. No, everything good we want, we're going to have to make it happen, right? You got to make this happen. Now, does the Bible tell us to make it happen? Well, you tell me. What does the Bible say? It says, encourage one another when you think of it. What does the Bible say about making it a habit? Is it a habit? If you're doing it every day, is that a habit? You're supposed to do it daily. This is the goal for us who say we follow Jesus. We follow Jesus, we do this. So that means we need to be intentional about it. So a couple ideas. Let me first off tell you what your goal is. The goal of your interactions with the people that you love, the people you're around, is this. It's 5 to 1. That's your goal. So on your notes, I want you just to circle that. Aim for 5 to 1. Just circle it. So here's what it means. My favorite marriage authors right now are Dr. Gottman and his wife. They've been teaching and studying marriage and relationships for 40 years. They have a lab where they literally bring couples in and can you see the monitor and the equipment on them? It's hard to see, I know. They've got them hooked up to machines and they're monitoring everything from their heart rate to their pulse to their blood pressure, everything. And then they watch them interact. How fun is this? Do you know that they have a validated 94% success rate at predicting which couple will make it and which will divorce? And they only need 15 minutes of conversation. They can watch a couple hooked up to those machines, and in 15 minutes, with a 94% success rate, they can tell you who's going to make it and who's not. Do you know what they're listening for? The ratio. Are there 5 positives for every 1 negative in the conversation? Are there 5 positives for every 1 negative? And they know that the 94%, the ones that are going to make it, or the relationships that are going to make it, they have the ratio. And when they hear this, they're like, you guys are fine. You guys are going to be just fine. You've got the ratio. And they know it's just how it is. If you're more positive than negative, and not just a little bit more, right? 5 positive interactions with your spouse for every single 1 negative, and you're going to be okay. Your marriage is going to be strong. And if they see that reverse, 5 negative for every 1 positive, guess what? You're not going to make it. It's just not going to make it. So that's the goal. You want to make sure that you're really working on this with, again, you work on this with your kids, 5 positive for every 1 negative. Is that how you are with your kids? Dear kid, now this is so hard, isn't it, as a parent? Man, this is hard. Because sometimes you watch your kids making decisions and you're like, no, I know where that goes, don't do it. And what do? We start really kind of trying to help them share from our own past, and we get really negative and critical. And so every time they're with us, they hear this, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. They don't hear any of the positive. And the ratios get out of order and the relationship with that kid falls apart. And it falls apart just because we're scared, right? We don't want them to make the mistakes we made. We can do that in our marriages. We can do it in any relationship. You've got to keep that ratio high. It's 5 to 1. Now, some tactics for how to do it. You can adopt what some people call the first 5 minutes rule. So the person I heard this said that when they got into their office, when they went to work, the first 5 minutes every day, they tried to write something encouraging to somebody. Okay, so the start of their day, and you may not go to an office, you may go to a factory, you can change this how it works for your schedule. For the first 5 minutes, you pick the 5 minutes and you try and write something encouraging to somebody once a day. First 5 minutes. You just see how it works for you in your schedule. And then the other thing I've been doing for years is add it to your day planner. I have a calendar online, and everything goes into my calendar, including the phrase encouragement. And it's right on my calendar every single week so that I remember to do this. Because I get busy, and I've got tons of meetings, and I've got more work than I can keep up with, and encouragement will be the thing forgotten unless I make it happen. So you got to make it systematic. How are you going to make it happen? Second, watch for something close to good. This is hard for some of you, really hard, because you're kind of a perfectionist. It's like, well, if it's not perfect, it's not worth anything. Oh, no. You can't fall into that trap. You've got to be looking for something just close to good. Like the woman, one of the shirts accidentally fell into the hamper. Touchdown. That's it. And if 2 fall in, he's getting kissed, right? So it's like, woo, all right, now you're onto something. I read this great story about this inner city Chicago teacher who has made positivity her focus with these kids. Now, you can imagine, a lot of these kids come from broken homes, drug-filled homes, alcoholic homes, just so broken. And they come into this schoolroom, and every day her focus is, how can I say something positive to each one of these kids? Even to the point where she said, if I give them a test, and it's a spelling test, and there's a 4-letter word that they spell wrong, and they got 3 of the 4 letters wrong, guess what letter I'm talking about? The one they got right. And she'll say things like, oh my goodness, you got this one letter right in this word. You're so smart. I bet next time you're going to get them all. Can you imagine the impact she has on those kids? Can you imagine the impact her words have with that level of positivity? You are not looking for perfection. If you are, you will not be praising and celebrating and encouraging people. You are looking for progress. Praise progress, because what gets praised gets repeated. What gets praised gets repeated. Don't forget that. Third, help them picture a better future. This is so important. And parents, I really want you to hear me on this one. It's really important. You got to help them picture, because kids today especially are really losing hope. Kids today are losing hope because they think that the future is bad and there won't be the same opportunities and it's not safe to have kids anymore, and on and on and on with all the fears and fears and fears and fears. And part of what we are supposed to do as Christians is we're supposed to bring hope and add courage. That's what encouragement is, right? I'm adding courage to people's lives. Paul did this in an amazing way. In the book of Acts, he was on a boat. They were on the Mediterranean Sea, and a huge storm came up, and they fought this storm for days. And the storm just kept coming and coming and coming, and they'd given up hope. And God communicated to Paul, it's going to be okay. Matter of fact, God told Paul, nobody on this boat is going to die. So here's what Paul did. He said to the whole ship, he said, all of you, I want you to eat something now for your own good, for not a hair of your heads will perish. Then he took some bread, gave thanks to God before them all, and he broke off a piece and ate it, and everyone was encouraged and began to eat. So he added courage to people who had no courage. That's what encouragement is. And he did it by telling them what their future was going to be like. And the future isn't bleak and dark. We have Christ. Ephesians says, when you follow Jesus, you are united with Christ. And the power that raised Christ from the dead is now aimed at you. There is so much not to be discouraged about when Jesus is in your life. And the reality is, you change people's lives when you do this. How many of you had to read anything by this man when you were in high school? right? That's usually when we read all of his books. Charles Dickens. He's one of the greatest writers in the history of the world. Charles Dickens, when he was 12 years old, his dad was thrown into prison. And Charles Dickens, at the age of 12, had to drop out of school and go work in a rat-infested factory, putting labels on bottles. That's what his job was. He pasted labels onto bottles. Obviously not the plan he had for his life. All he ever wanted to do was write books. But when Dad went to prison, there was no options for him. He had to get a job. So at the age of 12, that's what he started doing. But he still started writing on the side, and he would write a book, and he would send it off to publishers, and they would reject him and reject him and reject him. And one day, one of the rejections came back, and it was a rejection, but the publisher who had reviewed his book said this to Charles Dickens. He said, in the rejection, he included a note saying, "You are a great writer, and the world needs you." Can you imagine the impact on that young boy in that environment to read those words? Do you know what Charles Dickens did? He said he ran up and down the streets of London rejoicing when he read that note. Now, had he published anything? Nope, he got rejected again. But his life changed that day because of a handful of words. You are a great writer, and the world needs you. What was that, 6 or 7 words to change somebody's life? Do you see how powerful you are? Powerful. A handful of words changing people's lives. You have that power. He went on to write A Christmas Carol, David Copperfield, Oliver Twist, Great Expectation, Tale of Two Cities, and on and on and on with all of these amazing books. And who knows if any of it happens if somebody doesn't take a moment to say something encouraging to this young man in the middle of those struggles. Do you see the power you have? Who in your life right now is losing hope about their future? Who in your life right now is discouraged about where they're at and not happy with where they're at? You don't need to write them a book. They may write a book after you're done. You just need to encourage them. And a few words have tremendous power. Help them see a better future. So you're like, okay, well, how do I do that? Specifically point out their strengths. This is what you do. What are they good at? I want to ask you an honest question, and I want you to think about the answer to this. What do you think most people are more aware of? The things they don't do good, or their strengths? Most people in a critical world like this are very aware of all the things they don't do good. You know why? Because they're constantly being told them. You're not good at this. And they go on social media and they look at, I'm not as pretty as that person, I'm not as smart as that person, I'm not as successful as that person, I don't have a house as nice as that person. And so constantly there's this nonstop, you're not, you're not, you're not. People are not aware of what they're actually good at and how their strengths come across to all of us. You want to do something that will really change someone's life, point out the things about them that you like. So I've been doing this for years. When my encouragement thing goes off, one of the things that I try and do is think about who around me is doing something that I really admire or respect. So years and years ago, I was working with this woman, and she was in a leadership role, and she was sharp. Really enjoyed her. We would have leadership conversations, and we read the same kind of books, and I really enjoyed having these talks with her. And so one day she was leading a meeting. It was packed. There's 30 or 40 people in the room, and she just made a mistake. She just made a simple mistake. It wasn't even a big deal, but unfortunately, the wrong people were in the room, and they made it a big deal. And this poor woman did not deserve the backlash she got publicly and then obviously privately, because a short time after that meeting was over, we all got an email with another apology for something that really shouldn't have been a big deal at all. And I saw her a little bit later, and her shoulders were sagging, and she was clearly just being beat up behind the scenes. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Unfortunately, when you're around critical people, that's what it is. They make molehills into mountains. And so I wrote her an email. And I just said, part of what I said is, I just don't want you to be discouraged. Do you know how few people are strategic thinkers? And I made a bullet point list. Strategic thinkers and positive people and learners, which is so rare, and just plain nice, and relationally intelligent and driven and humble enough to admit a mistake. I said, these are all leadership competencies, and they are all very visible in you. You are a good leader. And as you can tell, I have a lot of respect for you. And I wrote just a little bit more and sent that email to her, and a short time later, got this huge response. Because she was very aware of all that she does wrong. But do you know how few people actually stop long enough to say, you know what, this is what I like about you. These are some of your natural strengths that I see, that I really enjoy. Flip your notes over on the back. Here's what I wanted to make this practical for you. Things to watch for and encourage. You can look for anything on that list. You see, does anyone's name jump out when you just look through that list? Write it down next to that word, or next to those words. And then there are different ways to encourage them, and encouraging things you can say to them. If you're a parent, every single one of your kids needs this. Every single one of your kids needs to hear what you, as mom or dad, admire about them. They all need to know it. They need to know what you think are their strengths. They need to know what you admire and respect and appreciate about them. And there are different ways to express it to them. So make sure that you take the time to do this. Tell them about their strengths, because I promise you, your kids are aware of their weaknesses. All right, one more thing. Something I've never talked about, and I had the idea a couple of months ago in my tremendous frustration over social media. I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit tired of all the negativity on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and it's just like nonstop criticism. I'm actually sick of it. And truthfully, I never want to read another political post for the rest of my life, if that's allowed. Can we sign up for that somewhere? I don't know how. But it's like, enough. Both sides think they're right, and both sides think the other sides are idiots. And I'm tired of it. I'm just tired of it. It just never ends. And so a couple of months ago, I'm like, getting frustrated with it, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, what does God expect of us as followers of Jesus? Well, could we bring something positive into this dark place? We know that social media is impacting young people. We know it. We know that it makes them less confident, that it is really destructive. The more time you spend on social media, the worse your life goes. There are measurable things that we know, because it's so toxic for people. And then I thought, well, wait a second. Jesus said, you're the light of the world, guys. If you're going to be on there, then bring something good into it. And I've never said this to you before. I want you to go on social media. I want you on there. Not to participate in what everybody else is doing, but to bring the love of God into that place. And here's two things I want. I want you, if you're on LinkedIn at all, go on LinkedIn and search for those two words, Everyday Heroes. Everyday Heroes. You can actually search for it on Google, but it's easier to find on LinkedIn. Just type that in. If you want to, send me a friend request, and you'll see it in I follow this group. What they do is every day they put up stories that are positive. When was the last time you turned on the news and heard a positive story, right? We just don't hear it. But this group does their best. Look at this story that just came out. Muhammad Mashali once found a child that suffered from diabetes and needed an insulin shot, but he couldn't afford them, so he asked his mom to buy him some. Sadly, his mom couldn't afford him either, and the child died. After this, he moved to one of the poorest countries and began treating medical patients free of charge. He passed away July 28th, 2020, days before his death. He was still helping everyone he could. Does the world need to know about this man? Absolutely. Are there good people in our world doing really, really good things? Absolutely. And shouldn't it be time for us as Christians to start telling the good stories? Christianity is based on the good news. That's what it's called. You ever heard the word gospel? You know what the word gospel means? Good news. We need to be good news bringers into a world where there is not a lot of good news. And we have reason for hope and optimism because we know how the story ends. We have a God of love on our side who's put us in his family forever. And so we should be telling this. So I follow it, and it just keeps coming up on my feed. If you ever see me on LinkedIn, that's on there. But the other thing, if you are on Facebook, then here's the goal, or any other social media. Your goal from now on is to post 2 or 3 encouraging things every single day you're on there. So you're like, well, geez, I don't want to do that. Then don't go on there. Okay? Just don't go on there. But if you're going to go on there, then look for something positive you can say. You can say something like, oh my goodness, you guys look so happy in this picture. It's great to see you guys, right? Or that food looks so good, right? Or I love your car. I'm out of ideas. But anyway, you can find it. I'd have to see the picture of. Find a way to say something positive, and your goal is 2 to 3 positive things every single day. Does the world need more positive? Of course it does. I won't even watch the news, truthfully, because I am up to here with negative. Don't want to even see it. I will not even watch it anymore. I'll read the headlines online, but I won't watch anymore. I don't need any more negative. So why don't we, as followers of Jesus, bring the positive? We can do this. And here's the thing. You're powerful. I've given you examples today of people's lives being changed by just a handful of positive words. You are powerful, and God made you powerful. You have this power to begin to change the lives of the people around you with encouragement. I'm going to finish with this. One psychologist said, you know what? No one has the power to reform another person. Nobody. You can't change another person. But by liking the other person as they are, you give them the power to change. Just telling people that you like this about them. I like this about you right now. Not as you will be someday if you stop doing this, but just as you are right now. We give people the power to change. So if you follow Jesus, which I know many of you would say, I'm a follower of Jesus, do you understand God commands this repeatedly in the Bible? You are commanded to be an encourager. Are you an encourager? Are you obeying this command? If you're not, what's your plan? How are you going to start? I've given you all kinds of ideas. Pick one. Make it your first habit of the day. Put it in your calendar. Some of you know you need to write a letter to your kids this week, and you need to tell them the things about them that you love. The things about them that you admire. Some of you need to start doing this with your spouse. Some of you know that the new thing is 5 to 1. It's a ratio you do not hit. But you got to start saying 5 positive for every 1 negative. So every time you're about to criticize your spouse or your kids, you got to say, wait, what are the last 5 positive things I said to them? And if you haven't said it, then you're not allowed to say this. Got to bring the encouragement. Obey the command and see what God does. If you're exploring your faith here with us or watching online and exploring your faith, like that psychologist said, liking the other person as they are gives them the power to change. God goes way beyond liking you. In Ephesians 1, it says, before he created the world, he loved you. Before he even made the world, he loved you. He was thinking about you and has never had you off of his mind. You matter every minute of every day. And the proof of how much he loves you is what he did when he sent his son Jesus to die on the cross for us so that we could be forgiven and made right with him. Let me have you bow your heads. Maybe you want to move from just knowing about or hearing about the love of God to experiencing it. You can experience this love. With your head bowed and your eyes closed, you can say something like this in your heart to him. You can just say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. I don't want to just hear about your love anymore. I want to experience it for myself. Please forgive me. Come and make your home inside of me today. With the faith I have, I'm turning to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish up, can I ask you all to take the connection card out of your program? Just take a moment. Even if you're a regular tender, you can just take it out, put your name down so we know you're here. But maybe you ask Jesus to forgive you or renew your commitment. You can let us know about that. Or some of you have something you want us to pray about. We have a whole team of people that will pray for you this week if you'll let us know what prayer requests you have. If you're watching online, you can let us know. There's a little Say Yes box in the upper right-hand screen on our website. You can just check that box and let us know if you have anything you want us to pray about or you made any spiritual decisions today, and we'll send you some follow-up stuff in the mail. Thanks so much for coming, and we hope to see you again next week.